"You are not my bride. Who are you?" The words fell sharply from the lips of Henry Rollins, a lonely rancher who had been waiting for the carriage all morning. He had paid a mail-order bride agency from back east to send him a woman, fair skin, blonde hair, a companion who would brighten his days and help tend his vast but empty homestead. But when the door of the carriage creaked open, it was not the pale-haired bride he had pictured who stepped down. Instead, a black woman with skin like polished mahogany and long dark hair braided neatly under a scarf stared back at him. She wore a plain cotton dress, her eyes full of both fear and wonder. She did not answer him, only tilted her head, as if she barely understood the words he spoke. Henry's jaw tightened. This had to be a mistake. "No, no," he muttered, stepping forward. "You're not her. They promised me a girl named Margaret, from Boston." He pointed toward the road as if the right woman would still come riding down it. The woman clutched the handle of a small leather bag, eyes darting nervously to the driver of the wagon. She seemed to understand she was not welcome, but there was nowhere else to go. The rancher felt frustration rise in him. He had endured long months of paperwork, promises, and waiting. His neighbors mocked him already for being desperate enough to order a bride by post. And now, when she finally arrived, it was someone entirely different. A foreigner who could hardly understand him. The woman opened her mouth, trying to speak. Her words came haltingly, thick with an accent. "I am bride," she said softly, almost pleading. Henry rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath. "No, this isn't right. This isn't what I asked for." Still, there she stood, staring at him with eyes so wide and uncertain that something in his chest stirred. But pride and disappointment hardened him again. The wagon driver shifted uncomfortably, tipping his hat to Henry. "This here's the one they sent, mister. My job's done." Henry scowled. The air between them felt heavy, tangled with disappointment and confusion. The lonely rancher had no idea that this woman, so unlike the one he had imagined, was about to change everything. The wagon master, a rugged man with dust-streaked clothes, quickly realized a mistake had been made. He pulled the folded papers from his pocket and compared them with the notes he had been given. Somewhere between the rail station and the frontier, the wrong woman had been loaded onto the wrong carriage. "This ain't her file," he muttered, squinting at the handwriting. "Looks like she was supposed to head farther west. But—" He stuffed the papers back into his vest with a shrug. "Too late now. Ain't no fixing it." Henry's face darkened. "What do you mean, too late? You can't just dump her here and ride off." The driver spat into the dust and gave a tired laugh. "She's a foreigner, mister. Barely knows the language. You send her off alone. She won't last a week in this country. There's no coach heading back for months. You either take her in, or leave her to the wolves." The woman lowered her gaze, clutching her small bag tighter. She looked as though she already knew she was unwanted. Henry ran a hand over his jaw, torn between frustration and pity. But then his eyes caught something that made him pause. The woman had tried to keep it hidden, but he noticed her hand. Wrapped tightly in a strip of cloth was her ring finger, swollen and bent at an odd angle. "What happened there?" he asked. The woman hesitated, then raised the injured hand as if ashamed. "Work?" she whispered in her thick accent. "Broken." The wagon master nodded. "Saw it when she climbed down. Must have been hurt before the trip. Been hiding it the whole way." Henry frowned. He could see the pain in her eyes as she tried to flex the finger. She had endured the long ride across dust, wind, and heat with an untreated wound. His anger softened, though he tried to keep his voice firm. "You can't work like that," he muttered. The driver sighed, already climbing back onto his seat. "Look, mister, I've done my part. She's yours now. Best make peace with it." He cracked his whip, and the horses lurched forward. The wagon rattled away, leaving only a cloud of dust and the sound of hooves fading down the road. Henry stood there, staring at the strange woman fate had dropped on his doorstep. She stood silently, head bowed, her broken finger trembling slightly as she tried to hold her bag. He let out a long breath. "Damn it all! he muttered, stepping forward. Come on then. Can't just leave you standing in the dirt. The woman lifted her eyes, surprise flickering across her face. Henry reached out carefully, taking her injured hand in his. It was warm, fragile. First thing we'll do, he said gruffly, is get that finger looked at. Let's go to the doctor. And though he hadn't asked for her, hadn't wanted her, Henry Rollins found himself guiding the woman toward his homestead, unknowingly stepping into a story far larger than either of them could imagine. Henry had planned to take the woman straight into town, to the small doctor's office 2 miles east. But before they could even reach his wagon, the sound of hooves thundered from the ridge. Dust billowed, and a group of riders came into view. 6 men on horses, led by one wearing a wide-brimmed hat with a silver star pinned to his vest. The lead rider reined in his horse sharply, glaring down at Henry and the woman. We're looking for a black woman, he barked. Matches her description. Henry stepped instinctively in front of her. And what's she supposed to have done? The man smirked, flashing the badge pinned to his chest. Sheriff's orders. She's wanted. His men fanned out, rifles resting against their saddles, eyes cold and hard. The woman clutched Henry's sleeve, trembling. Please, no, she whispered, her accent thick with fear. Henry narrowed his eyes. Something about the man's tone didn't sit right with him. You got a warrant? The rider pulled a folded paper from his vest and waved it in the air. Right here. Now step aside before you find yourself in trouble. Henry didn't move. He studied the paper but noticed it bore no official seal. The words looked hastily scrawled, almost as if a child had written them. You call this a warrant? Henry asked, his voice steady but sharp. Looks more like chicken scratch. The so-called sheriff's jaw tightened. He motioned to his men. Doesn't matter. She's coming with us. The woman cried out as one of the riders dismounted, grabbing for her arm. Without thinking, Henry shoved the man back. His voice thundered. She's under my roof now. You'll have to go through me first. The lead rider's eyes gleamed with anger. Careful, farmer. You don't want to stand in the way of the law. Henry pointed at the badges on their vests. They gleamed too bright, almost new, unlike any sheriff's badge he'd ever seen. Law, he spat. You're nothing but a pack of wolves in stolen metal. The woman pressed closer to Henry, clutching her bandaged finger against her chest. He turned his head slightly toward her. What did you do? He whispered. She shook her head violently. Nothing, nothing. They sell me. Henry's gut clenched. It all made sense. These men weren't lawmen. They were traffickers, dressed up to fool anyone too far from town to know better. The fake sheriff dismounted, his hand resting on the grip of his revolver. Last chance, rancher. Step aside. Henry's hand hovered over his own pistol, his voice steady as steel. You'll have to take her over my dead body. The standoff thickened in the dusty air. Horses pawed nervously at the ground. The woman buried her face against Henry's arm, praying he wouldn't leave her to their mercy. What neither she nor Henry knew was that the truth, and real justice, was already on its way. The air was thick with tension. 6 rifles glinted under the sun, aimed loosely but threateningly. Henry's hand tightened on his revolver, his body angled protectively in front of the woman. The fake sheriff sneered, taking a step closer. Last warning, farmer. Hand her over. But before Henry could answer, a shout echoed from the ridge. Hold it right there. Another group of riders galloped into view, dust kicking up behind them. These men wore worn but authentic gear, their badges dull from years of use, not shining like freshly polished trinkets. At their head was a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard and a revolver resting steady in his grip. The sheriff of Dawson County, Henry whispered under his breath. Relief washed through him. The real sheriff pulled his horse to a stop, eyes narrowing at the imposters. What in God's name are you boys doing playing dress-up with my badge? The fake sheriff stiffened. This is our business, old man. Don't interfere. Your business. The sheriff barked a bitter laugh. Your business is rustling, thieving, and kidnapping women. Been hunting your gang for months. He lifted his revolver. Drop the guns. The impostors hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks. Henry seized the moment, drawing his pistol in a smooth, practiced motion. You heard him. Drop him. For a breathless moment, it seemed violence would erupt. But one by one, the fake badges clattered to the ground, followed by the thud of rifles hitting the dirt. The real sheriff's men dismounted swiftly, shackling the impostors while Henry stood his ground. When it was over, the sheriff rode closer, studying Henry and the trembling woman beside him. You all right, miss? He asked gently. She nodded, though her hands still shook. Henry kept his arm around her, speaking for her when words failed. They were gonna take her. Sell her, she said. The sheriff sighed. Wouldn't be the first time. Traffickers like them prey on foreigners. Lucky you stood your ground. He tipped his hat toward Henry. You did good, rancher. Henry holstered his pistol, finally letting out the breath he'd been holding. The woman clung to him as though afraid he might vanish if she let go. When the posse rode off with their prisoners, silence returned to the dusty road. Henry looked down at her. She stared up at him, eyes full of gratitude, trust, and something else. Hope. Well, Henry muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Didn't reckon on this when I signed up for a bride. But looks like fate had other plans. She tilted her head, searching for the words. Finally, in her broken English, she whispered, I your bride now? Henry's lips curved into the faintest smile. Yeah, he said softly. You're my bride now. And as he guided her back toward his homestead, the lonely rancher realized that the life he thought he wanted, blonde hair, fair skin, perfection promised on paper, was nothing compared to the unexpected gift standing beside him. For the first time in years, Henry Rollins didn't feel alone.